I've been thinking a lot about inheritance lately. Not the money kind. God knows my family never had much of that. I mean the other things we passed down without meaning to. The way my grandfather's hands would shake when he talked about Korea. The way my mother kept every light in the house burning through the night, even after the electric company threatened to cut us off. The way my father would stare at nothing, jaw working like he was chewing words he'd never say. They're all gone now. Heart attack, cancer, and a car accident that the cops said didn't make sense. Dad just drove straight into Deer Creek like the road curved and he didn't. 3 different endings to 3 lives that started in the same small house in Chillicothe, Ohio, where I'm sitting right now, typing this out while every lamp, overhead fixture, and even the Christmas lights from 2 years ago blaze against the October dark. My name is Diego Farnsworth. If that sounds like an odd combination, blame my mother's obsession with her Spanish soap operas and my father's stubbornly English roots. I'm 34 years old, unmarried, and I teach history at the same high school I graduated from. I mention this because you need to understand that I'm not some conspiracy theorist living in a van. I pay my taxes, I go to PTA meetings, I buy Girl Scout cookies every spring even though I'm lactose intolerant, and those Samoas might as well be little chocolate landmines. But I also know something that most people in Southeast Ohio don't know, or choose to forget, or were lucky enough to never learn in the first place. I know why the old families in Ross County keep their porch lights on all night. I know why the Historic Society won't talk about what happened in the autumn of 1992. I know why there are exactly 17 houses in our township that have been abandoned but never demolished, their windows glowing with battery-powered LEDs that someone, I've never figured out who, replaces every few months. Most importantly, I know why my mother made me promise on her deathbed to never let the lights go out. I was 9 when it happened, old enough to remember everything, young enough that the adults thought they could protect me from it, young enough that when they failed, and they did fail spectacularly, I couldn't process what I was seeing as anything other than the world coming apart at its seams. It started with moths. That's what everyone remembers, if they remember anything at all. But the moths were just the visible part, like seeing someone's breath in winter. The cold was already there. The breath just made you notice it. I'm writing this because those 17 houses won't be enough soon. The batteries are dying faster. The old families I'm moving away are dying off. And last night, I saw the moths again. October 1992 was unseasonably warm in Chillicothe. I remember because my mother had bought me a Batman costume for Halloween, the Michael Keaton version with the molded plastic muscles, and I was worried I'd sweat through it before we even left the house. The paint was peeling off our front porch in long strips that looked like sunburned skin, and the corn in the fields around town stood brown and rattling, 2 weeks past when it should have been harvested. My father worked at the paper mill down by the Scioto River, and he'd been pulling double shifts that whole month. The mill had gotten some new contract with a company out of Columbus, and everyone was working overtime to meet demand. He'd come home with his clothes smelling like sulfur and wet cardboard, eat whatever my mother had kept warm for him, and fall asleep in his recliner with the TV mumbling the 11 o'clock news. My mother was different then, before everything. She smiled. She sang while she cooked, these old Mexican ballads her grandmother had taught her. She'd dance me around the kitchen while the radio played Selena, teaching me Spanish words I'd forget by morning. Diego, mi amor, she'd say. You got your father's face, but your mother's soul. The first time I saw the moths was October 13th, a Tuesday. I know the date because I'd just gotten back a spelling test with a red 100% at the top, and Mrs. Hendricks had put one of those scratch and sniff stickers on it. Pizza, which seemed weird even then. I was at the kitchen table doing long division homework when something tapped against the window. Not tapped. That's not right. It was more like when you drop a cotton ball, that soft, nothing sound that you feel more than hear. But it kept happening, over and over, this gentle patter like the world's quietest rain. When I looked up, the window was covered in moths. Not the little brown ones that eat your sweaters. These were huge, the size of my hand with my fingers spread. Their wings were pale gray with patterns that looked like faces and TV static. You'd see them if you stared long enough, but they'd shift the second you tried to focus. They covered every inch of glass, the bodies pressed flat, wings barely moving. "Mom?" I called out, but my voice came out strange, like I was talking underwater. She walked in from the living room carrying a basket of laundry, and when she saw the window, the basket hit the floor. Socks and underwear scattered across the linoleum. She stood there, mouth open but not making any sound, and that scared me more than the moths. Then she did something I'll never forget. She walked to the light switch, that old yellowed one by the door that Dad kept saying he'd replace, and her hand hovered over it. Her fingers shook like she was fighting herself, like one part of her wanted to flip it off and another part was screaming not to. "Diego," she said, and her voice had gone flat, like she was reading instructions. "Go to your room. Turn on your lamp. The overhead light too. And the one in your closet." "But Mom..." "Now." I'd never heard her voice do that before. Not angry, not scared, just empty, like something had reached inside her and scooped out everything that made her my mother. I ran to my room and did what she said. Through my window, I could see moths covering the glass there too, and beyond them, more moths swirling in the streetlight like ash from a fire that covered the whole world. Our neighbor, Mr. Horvath, was standing in his front yard with a flashlight, the beam pointing straight up, and the light was thick with wings. He was laughing, but it sounded wrong, too high, like a kid trying to imitate an adult. From downstairs, I heard my mother on the phone. Her words were fast and sharp, switching between English and Spanish. I caught fragments. "Started already?" "No, the lights are on." "How many houses?" "Diego doesn't..." "Yes, I remember." Then the power went out. The darkness wasn't gradual. It was absolute, like someone had thrown a blanket over the world. I stood frozen in my room, hands stretched out in front of me, trying to remember where my bed was, what the door was, where anything was. The silence was worse than the dark. No hum from the refrigerator downstairs, no tick of the clock in the hallway, no distant drone of the highway. Just my breathing and my heartbeat, both too fast. Then I heard my mother scream. Not a horror movie scream, but something raw and primitive. The sound the person makes when their body takes over and their mind gets shoved into the passenger seat. I fumbled my way to the door, barking my shin on my desk chair. The hallway was somehow darker than my room, if that was possible. I could hear my mother downstairs, talking to herself in rapid Spanish. Prayers, I realized. She was saying prayers I'd heard at my grandmother's funeral, the ones that took forever while everyone stood in the cemetery under the July sun. "Mom?" My voice cracked. The praying stopped. For 3 heartbeats, I counted. There was nothing. Then, "Diego, baby, stay where you are. Don't come downstairs." But I was already at the top of the stairs, one hand on the banister. And that's when I noticed it. The darkness was moving. Not shadows shifting, but the actual dark itself, rolling and churning like smoke underwater. And there was a smell, sweet and rotten, like fruit left too long in the heat. Something brushed past my face, soft like moth wings, but too wet, too warm. I jerked back and my hand left the banister. For a moment I was falling, that sick, weightless feeling, and then my mother's arms were around me, pulling me back from the stairs. She'd moved through the house in complete darkness, navigating by memory or instinct or something else I didn't understand. "We need light," she whispered in my ear. "Any light. Help me." We actually crawled on our hands and knees to the kitchen. Mom knew exactly where she was going, pulling me along when I tried to go the wrong way. The moths were inside now. I could hear them, that cotton-soft sound multiplied by hundreds, maybe thousands. They were in the walls, between the floorboards, inside the spaces that should have been solid. My mother found the drawer she was looking for and pulled out birthday candles, the emergency stash she kept for when I inevitably forgot to tell her about a classmate's party until the morning of. Her hand shook as she lit match after match, but they kept going out, the flame dying the instant it caught. "They don't want us to see," she muttered, and I wasn't sure if she was talking to me or herself. Outside, I could hear voices, not calling for help or checking on neighbors, but singing. A bunch of different songs all at once. Hymns, commercial jingles, nursery rhymes, creating this horrible discord that made my teeth ache. Mr. Horvath's laugh had spread to others, that same too-high pitch, like a whole choir of broken children. My mother grabbed my face, her palms cold against my cheeks. "Diego, listen to me. Whatever you see, whatever you think you see, you keep your eyes on the light. Any light, even if it's just a match, a spark, anything. That's the only real thing. Everything else is them." "Who's them?" She didn't answer. Instead, she found the camping lighter my father used for the grill, the long blue one with the trigger. She clicked it once, twice, and on the third try, a tiny flame appeared. The kitchen exploded into visibility, but wrong. The moths weren't moths anymore. They were pieces of something larger, fragments of a thing that existed in spaces our house didn't have. I saw fingers that bent in the wings, eyes that folded in the patterns, mouths that opened on the more mouths. The walls breathed, the ceiling rippled like water. And standing where our refrigerator should have been was Mrs. Chen from 2 houses down. Except her face was on backwards, and she was smiling with teeth that went all the way around her head. "Don't look," my mother said, pressing my face against her shoulder. "Look at the light." Only the light. But the tiny flame was already dying, and in its last flicker I saw something that made my mother's prayers sound like screams. My father was standing in the doorway, home from his shift early. His eyes were closed, but beneath his eyelids something moved with too many legs. "Heather," he said in a voice full of moths. "Turn off the light." My mother's grip on me tightened until her nails bit through my shirt. The camping lighter trembled in her hand, its small flame the only barrier between us and whatever had walked into our house wearing my father's body. "That's not him," she whispered, but her voice carried doubt like a stone in her throat. "Diego, that's not your father." The thing in the doorway tilted its head, too far, until it nearly touched his shoulder. "Of course I am." "Heather, honey, you're scaring the boy. Come here, both of you." He took a step forward, and in the lighter's glow I could see his work clothes were wrong. Not dirty or torn, but existing incorrectly. Like someone had tried to remember what clothes look like and gotten the idea right, but the execution wrong. His paper mill uniform flickered between fabric and something organic. something that pulsed with its own rhythm. "Diego," my father said, and hearing my name in that moth-filled voice made my stomach clench. "Remember when we went fishing at Paint Creek? You caught that bluegill, and you cried when we had to throw it back because it was too small. You said it looked sad. That was real. That it happened. Last summer, just the two of us, while Mom visited her sister in Columbus." I started to pull away from my mother, confused, but she yanked me back. "They know things," she hissed. "They know everything we know. Every memory becomes theirs the moment someone falls asleep near them." When did I fall asleep? The thing wearing my father's face smiled wider, and I could see moths crawling between his teeth, using them like stairs. "Heather, I've been awake for 37 hours. The mill, remember? The overtime? I'm so tired. We should all rest. Together." The camping lighter sputtered. My mother clicked it frantically, but the flame was dying. In those strobing moments of light and dark, I saw my father's shape change, stretch tall, shrink wide, split into pieces that shouldn't exist in the same space. And behind him, filling our hallway, were our neighbors. Mrs. Chen with her backwards face, Mr. Horvath whose laughing mouth had grown until it took up most of his head, the Pearson twins from across the street, holding hands even though their fingers had fused together into something like tree roots. "Mom," I said, and my voice sounded very small. "What are they?" "I don't know what they are," she said, pulling me backward toward the stove. "But I know what they want." She turned the gas knob. I heard the hiss, smelled that sharp warning smell that meant danger. But she didn't light it. She held the dead lighter like a weapon, her thumb on the trigger. "You light that, you'll kill us all," my father thing said, but for the first time it sounded worried. "The boy, too. Better than what you'd do to him." My mother's voice had steel in it now, the kind I'd only heard once before, when a drunk man at the grocery store had grabbed my shoulder and wouldn't let go. The moths were agitated now, the wing beats no longer soft but frantic, like static between radio stations. The darkness itself seemed to pull back, coiling in the corners of our kitchen. The neighbors in the hallway stopped their approach. "You don't remember, do you?" the father thing said. 1967. Your mother's house. The same offer. The same choice. She chose to forget. Chose to let the light burn. And look how that turned out. Cancer at 53. Your father, driving into traffic. Your brother. Don't, my mother said. Overseas, they told you. Training accident. But you know that's not true. You know what really happened to Roberto. My mother made a sound like she'd been punched. I'd never known she had a brother. Give us the boy, the thing continued. And now it didn't sound like my father at all. It sounded like wind through empty buildings, like the space between heartbeats. One child, that's all. One child who can cross between waking and sleeping, who can carry us forward. In return, this town prospers. Your family prospers. No more double shifts at the mill. No more choosing between electricity and groceries. No more Diego, my mother finished. He won't die. He'll be more than alive. He'll be the bridge. The gas hiss grew louder. The kitchen was filling with it now, that dangerous smell getting stronger. I understood what my mother was planning, and part of me, the part that wanted to live, even if living meant terror, started to pull away from her. But she held me tight and spoke in Spanish, rapid and soft. Tu abuela knew. She taught me the words, the prayers, but I didn't believe. I thought it was just stories, old country superstition. But she knew they come every 25 years, when the barrier wears thin. They need an anchor, someone young, someone who hasn't learned to guard their dreams. That's why the 17 houses keep their lights on. 17 children they took before we learned to fight back. 17 bridges. The father thing corrected. 17 blessed souls who shepherd this town through the dark seasons. Your son could be the 18th. The last one we need. To do what? I asked, and immediately wished I hadn't because every face in the doorway turned to look at me. To make the darkness permanent. They said in unison, the voices harmonizing into something that sounded almost beautiful. To end the tyranny of light. My mother flicked the lighter one more time. This time, a spark caught. Run, she said, shoving me toward the back door as the kitchen erupted in flame. The explosion knocked me through the screen door and onto the back porch. I hit the wooden boards hard enough to knock splinters loose, my ears ringing with a high whine that drowned out everything else. Orange light painted the world in harsh strokes, and for a moment, just a moment, the moths were gone, burned away or fled from the fire. I rolled onto my stomach and looked back. Our kitchen was a mouthful of flame, windows blown out, curtains catching like tissue paper. I couldn't see my mother. I couldn't see anything but fire and the silhouettes of things that weren't quite human anymore, stumbling out of the inferno. Then hands grabbed me, real hands, warm and calloused and trembling. Mr. Wickham from 3 houses down, still in his pajamas and work boots, pulled me to my feet. Jesus Christ, kid. Come on, we gotta... He stopped mid-sentence, staring at something over my shoulder. His face went slack, and I watched his pupils dilate until his eyes were mostly black. A moth landed on his cheek, then another, and another, until they covered half his face like a living mask. Never mind, he said in a voice that wasn't his anymore. Stay right here, Diego. I ran. Behind me, the fire spread to the garage, and something inside, gasoline, paint thinner, the propane tank for the grill, exploded with a sound like the world cracking. The force of it sent me sprawling onto our neighbor's lawn. When I looked up, half our house was gone, replaced by a pillar of fire that twisted up into the night sky. But the darkness was fighting back. It poured out of storm drains, oozed between fence posts, dripped from tree branches like tar. Where it touched the firelight, both seemed to cancel out, leaving patches of nothing. Not dark, not light. Just absence. I ran toward town, toward the lights of downtown Chillicothe. My feet knew the way, even if my mind was screaming static, past the Hendersons' house, where all the windows were dark, and something too large moved behind the glass, past the elementary school where the playground equipment had somehow become organic, swings pulsing like veins, the slide breathing in wet gasps, past the Presbyterian church where the bell was ringing backwards, the sound coming before the strike. The streetlights were dying one by one, each going out with a pop like breaking bones. The darkness followed me, and in it, I could hear them calling my name. Not shouting it, but speaking it the way my mother did when she tucked me in, the way my father did when he taught me to throw a baseball, the way every person who'd ever cared about me had said it. They were using love like a weapon. I made it to Water Street before my legs gave out. The old part of town, where the buildings were brick and stubborn and had survived floods and fires and the economic death of the Rust Belt. Maynard's Hardware still had its lights on. The store had been closed for hours, but the owner always left the display windows lit to show off the seasonal decorations. I pressed my face against the glass. Inside, between the Halloween scarecrows and plastic pumpkins, Mr. Maynard sat in a folding chair, awake, holding a shotgun across his lap. Our eyes met through the window, and for a second, I thought he'd let me in. Then I saw the others. 5 more people, all sitting in chairs arranged in a circle, all armed, all with their eyes fixed on the door. They weren't looking at me. They were looking through me, at what was coming. "I'm sorry, boy," Mr. Maynard mouthed. "Can't break the circle." I understood. They'd figured out something. Some way to stay safe, but it only worked if they didn't open the door, didn't break whatever protection they'd built. I pressed my palm against the window, leaving the handprints and the condensation from my breath, and kept moving. That's when I saw the van. White, unmarked, parked outside the Ross County Historical Society. The engine was running, headlights cutting through the dark like surgical tools. The side door was open, and inside, lit by camping lanterns and battery-powered floods, were 3 people in what looked like homemade hazmat suits, trash bags and duct tape and swimming goggles. "Kid," one of them shouted, voice muffled by what might have been a motorcycle helmet. "Diego Farnsworth?" The fact that they knew my name should have scared me, but when I turned around, I saw the darkness had taken shape. My shape. Dozens of versions of me made from shadow and moth wings, all walking in perfect synchronization toward where I stood. I dove for the van. The inside of the van smelled like gasoline, burnt coffee, and fear sweat. Someone grabbed my arm and yanked me deeper into the vehicle as the door slammed shut behind me. Through the back windows, I could see my shadow selves pressing against the glass, their moth-wing fingers leaving patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Drive, Dolores. Now." The person in the motorcycle helmet shouted, and the van lurched forward with enough force to send me sliding across the floor. I scraped my palms on what felt like sandpaper. The entire floor had been covered in grip tape, the kind skateboarders use. Every surface inside was either wrapped in aluminum foil or covered with mirrors, even the ceiling. Battery-powered Christmas lights were strung everywhere, blinking in random patterns that made my headache worse. The person who'd pulled me in pushed their swimming goggles up onto their forehead. A woman, maybe 30, with burn scars covering the left side of her face. "You're Heather Delgado's boy," she said. It wasn't a question. "My mom. The house. We know." She grabbed my chin, turned my head left and right, stared into my eyes with an intensity that made me want to pull away. "How long since you slept?" Tuesday morning? Maybe Monday?" Jesus. She let go of my face and turned to the others. "He's been awake for over 40 hours. They must have been preparing him." The driver, Dolores, took a hard right that sent us off sliding. She was older, maybe 60, wearing what looked like a welding mask pushed up on top of her head. "Preparing him for what, Connie?" "To be the 18th bridge," said the third person. And when they pulled off their helmet, I recognized them immediately. Mr. Nguyen, who ran the corner store where I bought comic books. He looked exhausted, his usual smile replaced by grim determination. "Your mother called us Tuesday night. Said she'd seen the signs. Milk souring, birds flying backwards, her dreams tasting like copper." "You knew?" I said, anger cutting through my fear. You all knew this was coming and nobody did anything? We did do something, Connie said, pulling out a thermos from a duffel bag. We've been doing something for 25 years, ever since the last convergence. She unscrewed the thermos and the smell that came out made my eyes water, like battery acid mixed with vanilla extract. Drink this. All of it. What is it? Insurance, Dolores called from the front. In case we don't make it to the sanctuary. I looked at the liquid. It was silver. Actually silver, with little threads of gold swirling through it like DNA helixes. Every instinct told me not to drink it, but then I heard something hit the roof of the van. Footsteps. Walking. Above us. I drank. It tasted like licking a battery while chewing mint gum, and my whole body went rigid. Electricity, or something like it, raced through my veins. Suddenly I could see everything too clearly. Every mote of dust in the air, every reflected light bouncing off the mirrors and foil, every imperfection in the grip tape. And underneath it all, I could see them. The entities. They weren't just moths. They were holes in reality wearing moth shapes like we wear clothes. They existed in the spaces between seconds, in the pause between heartbeats, in the moment between sleeping and waking. And they were old. Older than Chillicothe, older than Ohio, older than any human word for time. Holy shit, I gasped. Yeah, Mr. Wynne said grimly. Now you see them properly. Your grandmother saw them too, Diego. Your mom's mom. She was one of us, 25 years ago. She helped save 13 children before. The van's engine cut out. We rolled to a stop in the middle of Payne Street, right in front of the courthouse. The streetlights were all out, but the courthouse clock tower still glowed, its face reading 11:47. That's not right, Dolores said, checking her watch. It was 11:47 20 minutes ago. Through the windshield, we could see people walking toward us from every direction. Not running, not shambling, just walking with perfect synchronization. Every person I'd ever known in Chillicothe. Teachers, neighbors, kids from school. All with moths pouring from their mouths, eyes, ears, all smiling with too many teeth. They're hurting us, Connie whispered, leading us exactly where they want us. The courthouse doors swung open, and something walked out that made my brain refuse to process what I was seeing. It was like looking at an optical illusion that kept shifting. One second it was my father, the next it was a pillar of living darkness, then it was my mother, burnt and beautiful. Then it was me, aged up 20 years. Then it was nothing but moths pretending to have a shape. It spoke with the voice of the entire town. The children always try to run. Every 25 years, you build your lights, your circles, your sanctuaries, and every time we adapt. Evolution, Diego. We've learned to feed on more than dreams now. We can eat memories, hopes, the future you haven't lived yet. Burn it all, Connie said quietly, and I realized she was holding a road flare. So was Mr. Wynne. So was Dolores. But we're inside the... Better to burn than let them use us, Mr. Wynne said. That's what your grandmother taught us. That's what your mother knew. Fire's the only thing that's real enough to hurt them. Everything else, the guns, the lights, the prayers, it's just buying time. The thing wearing every face I'd ever loved tilted its head. Heather already tried that. It only freed us faster. The house, the fire, her sacrifice. It opened doors that were meant to stay closed. We thank her for that. My hands clenched into fists. "You lying?" "Am I?" "Look." It gestured to the courthouse windows, and there, lit by some impossible light from within, I could see my mother. She was standing perfectly still, her eyes closed, something dark and wet covering her from head to toe. As I watched, her eyes opened, and they were full of stars. Actual stars, like someone had punched holes in her head to show the universe behind them. "She's becoming one of us," the entity said. "The fire didn't kill her. It transformed her. Just like it will transform you all. Unless..." It paused, and I knew what was coming. The offer. The deal. The same choice they've been forcing on families for who knows how long. Unless Diego comes with us. Willingly. One child to save a town. It's really quite reasonable. The silver liquid I drank was doing something in my vision. I could see through the moments, like flipping through a book too fast and catching glimpses of every page at once. I saw myself stepping out of the van, 1,000 versions of that choice playing out simultaneously. In some, I dissolved into moths instantly. In others, I became something worse. In exactly one version, something else happened, but the image slipped away before I could grasp it. "Don't listen to them," Connie said, but her voice was shaking. "They show you what they want you to see." "Do we?" The entity gestured again, and the courthouse windows became screens, each one showing a different scene. My father at the paper mill, working his machine while moths poured from his eyes like tears. Mrs. Chen teaching her piano students, their fingers fusing to the keys. The Pearson twins in their bedroom, building something out of their own bones, laughing as they worked. "This is what happens when we take them against their will," it said. "But willing bridges? Oh, they're different. They keep their minds, the memories. They become translators between our worlds." Mr. Wynn lit his flare. The harsh red light carved shadows that shouldn't exist, angles that folded in on themselves. "Dolores, on my signal..." "Wait," I said. Everyone turned to look at me. Even the entity seemed surprised, its many faces all showing the same expression of curiosity. "My grandmother," I said. "You said she was one of you, 25 years ago. But she lived. She had my mother. She died of cancer, not this." Connie and Mr. Wynn exchanged glances. "Tell him," Dolores said from the driver's seat. "Kid deserves to know." Connie sighed. "Your grandmother made a different deal. She offered herself as a temporary bridge. 3 days and 3 nights. Long enough for them to feed, but not long enough to fully transform. In exchange, they spared the children and left for another 25 years. But the cancer was from those 3 days. Being a bridge, even temporarily, it changes you at a cellular level. Your DNA becomes a conversation between 2 realities. Sometimes that conversation becomes cancer. Sometimes it becomes other things. I thought about my grandmother, who I barely remembered. She died when I was 3, but I had fragments. Her hands teaching me to fold paper cranes. Her voice singing Spanish lullabies. Her eyes that seemed to hold stars. Real stars. She saved 13 children, I said slowly. But there was supposed to be 18 bridges total. The ones who got away, Mr. Wynn confirmed. We've been keeping them safe ever since. The 17 houses with lights that never go out. Those are the families that escaped. Every night they burn electricity like a prayer, keeping the darkness at bay. The entity made a sound like wind through broken windows. 17 fragments of a failed ritual. Do you know what that does to us, Diego? It's like having a wound that won't heal, a hunger that only grows. Your grandmother's bargain was meant to satisfy us, but it only made us more desperate. So take me, I said, and everyone in the van started talking at once, but I kept going. Take me as a temporary bridge. 3 days and 3 nights. Like my grandmother. The entity's faces all smiled in unison. She was older, stronger, had years to prepare. You're just a child who's been awake too long. You wouldn't survive the first night. Then tell me what would. Silence. Even the moth stopped moving, frozen in mid-flight like a photograph. Interesting, it finally said. You're not offering the sacrifice yourself. You're negotiating. I stood up in the van, my legs shaky but holding. The silver drink was still burning through me, showing me glimpses of possibility. You need bridges. But bridges work both ways. My grandmother went to your side, but what if you came to ours? Diego, what are you doing? Connie grabbed my arm. But I saw it now. The thread I'd glimpsed in those 1,000 possibilities. You exist in dreams, in darkness, in the spaces between. But fire hurts you. Light pushes you back. Because you can't fully exist here. You need us to anchor you. But what if instead of taking our children to your dark, you sent yours to our light? The courthouse doors burst open and more entities poured out, not wearing human faces now, but in their true forms. They were beautiful and terrible, like deep-sea creatures made of shadow and starlight, their bodies constantly shifting between states of matter. Our children, they said, and their voice was almost sad. We have no children. We don't create. We only consume and transform. Then transform differently, I said. Instead of making us into bridges to your world, become bridges to ours. Learn what it's like to be solid, to be real, to be mortal, my mother's voice said, and she walked through the crowd of entities like they were mist. She was changed. Her skin seemed to contain galaxies. Her hair moved like it was underwater, but she was still my mother. That's what you're really offering, isn't it, mijo? A trade. Our mortality for their immortality. The entities recoiled. That's not possible. Isn't it? My mother reached into her chest, literally into it, her hand passing through her ribs like they were made of light, and pulled out something that looked like a coal from a fire, if fire could be frozen in time. This is what I took from your realm when I burned. A piece of your heart, or what passes for one. It's already dying in our world, becoming real, becoming finite. In the few hours, it will be just carbon and memory. She held it out to them. Take it back, and remain as you are. Or let it die, and learn what we know. That everything ends, and that's what makes it precious. The silver in my veins was fading, my vision returning to normal, but I could still feel the weight of the moment. Every entity in Chillicothe was watching, waiting, considering something they'd never considered before. If we become mortal, they said slowly, we could die. Yes, my mother said. But you could also live. The piece of frozen fire in my mother's hand pulsed once, like a heartbeat made of light. The entities drew closer, the forms wavering between shadow and substance. I could feel their hunger, but also something else. Curiosity, maybe even longing. "Show us," they said. My mother closed her eyes and crushed the coal in her fist. It shattered like glass, releasing something that wasn't quite light or dark, but the border where they meet. The fragments hung in the air for a moment, then began to rain down like snow that burned cold. Where the fragments touched the entities, they solidified. Not all at once, but in spreading patches like frost on a window. One entity's appendage became a human hand, brown, weathered, with a scar across the palm. Another grew an eye, singular and green, that blinked in wonder at its own existence. They weren't becoming human exactly, but something new, something between. "It hurts," one said, and there was amazement in its voice. "Pain. We've caused it, but never felt it." "Everything real hurts sometimes," Dolores said quietly from the driver's seat. She'd lowered her welding mask, and I could see tears on her cheeks. "That's how you know you're alive." But not all the entities were willing. Some pulled back, retreating into pure shadow, screaming in frequencies that made my teeth ache. They lashed out at their changing siblings, trying to pull them back into formlessness. The courthouse plaza became a battlefield of philosophy made physical, those choosing mortality against those clinging to eternal hunger. Mr. Wynne grabbed me and Connie, pulling us behind the van as the conflict exploded outward. Windows shattered up and down Paint Street. The courthouse clock stopped at 11:59, its hands trembling between one day and the next. Street lamps exploded in showers of sparks that fell upward, defying gravity. Through it all, my mother stood in the center of the chaos, unchanged by the violence around her. She was the fulcrum, the point where two realities balanced, and she was smiling. Not the twisted smile of the possessed, but the sad, knowing smile she'd worn at my grandmother's funeral. "Mama," I called out, but she shook her head. "This is my choice, Diego." My mother held them back for 25 years. Now I'm giving them 25,000 tomorrows. I didn't understand until I saw what was happening to her. Every fragment of that frozen fire she'd crushed was returning to her, carrying with it pieces of the entities who'd chosen change. She was becoming a furnace, a transformation engine that turned immortal shadow into mortal flesh. Her skin cracked like old paint, revealing something underneath that was neither human nor other, but the process of becoming itself. "We need to go," Connie said, trying to pull me toward the van. "When this resolves, there's going to be a..." The world inhaled. It's the only way to describe it. Everything, air, sound, light, was pulled toward my mother for one impossible moment. Then it exhaled, and the explosion knocked us flat. When I opened my eyes, the courthouse was gone. Not destroyed, gone. Replaced by a perfectly circular park with 17 trees arranged in a spiral pattern. Each tree was different. Oak, maple, pine, willow, and each one glowed faintly from within, as if their sap was made of light. Around the park, people were standing up, looking at themselves in wonder. Mrs. Chen's face was forward again, but she had moth wings folded against her back like a cape. Mr. Horvath's mouth was normal-sized, but when he spoke, his words came out as small lights that danced away on the wind. The Pearson twins were separate again, but they left trails of shadow when they moved, after images that took seconds to fade. And in the center of it all, where my mother had stood, was a statue. Not stone or metal, but something that looked like crystallized smoke, constantly shifting between forms. Sometimes my mother, sometimes my grandmother, sometimes women I didn't recognize but knew were part of my family line stretching back generations. "The bridges," Mr. Nguyen said softly. "They actually did it. They became bridges. But not all of them. In the distance, we could hear screaming. Not human screams, but the sound of reality tearing. The entities who'd refused the change were fleeing, burrowing back into whatever dark spaces they'd come from. As they went, they pulled pieces of the night with them, leaving tears in the air that showed nothing behind them. Not darkness, just absence. "They'll be back," Connie said. 25 years, maybe less. And they'll be angry. "No," said a voice I recognized but had never heard before. One of the transformed entities approached us. It looked mostly human now, a middle-aged woman with gray-streaked hair and eyes that held depths like wells. But her shadow moved independently, and when she breathed out, moths came with the air. "Those who fled will never return. They've seen what we become, and it terrifies them more than light ever did. We chose the harder path, to end, to feel, to lose. They'll find other towns, other worlds, but not here. This place is poison to them now." She turned to me. "You mother and grandmother created us. In a way, we're your siblings now. The children Heather Delgado and Rosa Delgado gave birth to, through sacrifice." I wanted to be angry, wanted to hate her for what they'd taken. But looking at her, at all of them, stumbling through their first moments of mortality like newborns, I could only feel exhausted. They'd traded eternity for a human lifetime. In the end, maybe we'd all lost something. Or maybe that was the point. That was 25 years ago. I'm 34 now, teaching history to kids who weren't even born when the courthouse disappeared. They walk past that spiral park every day without knowing it used to be the heart of our town government. The official story is that the courthouse was demolished due to structural damage from the gas leak explosion of 1992. The trees? An environmental art project. The statue of shifting smoke that might be my mother. Abstract memorial to the victims of the Chillicothe gas tragedy. 17 families still keep their lights on all night. They're the descendants of the children who almost became bridges in the convergences before. Old habits, old fears, old promises. But also, I think, a form of remembrance. Those lights say, we survived. We remember. We're watching. The transformed entities integrated into our town with surprising ease. Mrs. Patterson, that's what the gray-haired one calls herself now, runs the bakery on 2nd Street. Her moth shadow helps her work through the night, and her bread is so good people drive from Columbus to buy it. She ages like the rest of us now. Wrinkles, gray hair, the occasional complaint about her back. She seems to cherish every ache. Mr. Horvath recovered, mostly. He has good days and bad days. On bad days, he forgets that the thing wearing his face for those hours wasn't really him. On good days, he and the entity that copied him play chess in the park. They're evenly matched. My father never fully came back. Part of him stayed in that space between sleep and waking. He works, eats, lives, but sometimes I catch him staring at nothing, his eyes tracking something only he can see. He never did go back to the paper mill. These days he makes furniture in the garage. Beautiful, impossible pieces where the wood grain forms patterns that shift when you're not looking directly at them. But last night, for the first time in 25 years, moths gathered at my window. Not many, maybe a dozen, but they had that same wrongness, those patterns in their wings that suggested faces. They didn't tap or push against the glass. They just waited, watching. I found Mrs. Patterson at her bakery at 3 a.m., kneading tomorrow's bread with shaking hands. "You feel it too," I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded, her shadow self flickering nervously. "Something's coming." Not the same ones. They kept their word about never returning. But others. Ones who heard what happened here. Ones who think we found a weakness to exploit. The transformation. They think they can use it as a weapon. Or reverse it. Force us back. She stopped kneading, flour-dusted hands pressed flat against the counter. "Diego, I've been mortal for 25 years. I felt joy, sorrow, love, arthritis. I burned my tongue on coffee last week and cried. Not from pain, but from gratitude that I could feel it. I won't go back to the hunger. I can't." I understood. The transformed entities had become more human than some humans. They'd earned their mortality through choice, through sacrifice. And now something wanted to take that away. This morning I did 3 things. First, I visited my mother's statue and left fresh marigolds, her favorite flowers. The crystallized smoke seems warmer lately, more active. Sometimes I swear I can hear her humming those old Mexican ballads. Second, I went to every one of those 17 houses and told them to check their lights, stock up on batteries, and remember the old rules. Never look at them directly. Never let the lights go out. Never answer the door after midnight. Third, I started writing this account, because if something happens, if this new convergence goes wrong, someone needs to know the truth, the real history. The sun is setting now. My house, my parents' old house that I inherited and rebuilt, is blazing with light. Christmas lights, work lights, desk lamps, even a disco ball I found at a yard sale that throws sparkles across every surface. It looks insane. It looks like exactly what it is, a declaration of war against the dark. They think they know us, think they understand what happened here. But they didn't watch my mother become a bridge between worlds. They didn't see my neighbors choose mortality over eternity. They don't know that Chillicothe, Ohio, population 21,000, is the place where darkness itself learned to fear the light. The moths are gathering again. Hundreds now. But this time we're ready. This time we're not alone. This time when morning comes, and morning always comes, we'll still be here. All of us. Human, transformed, and whatever we're becoming together. The lights stay on in Chillicothe. They always will.